There is a strange truth hidden in history. People living over 1,000 years ago, without beds as soft as clouds, blackout curtains, or white noise machines, may have actually slept better than you. Tonight, we're going back to the Viking Age, a world of flickering firelight, long winters, and slow rhythms of nature, to uncover why these ancient people may have enjoyed deeper, more peaceful rest than most modern humans ever do. Welcome to History for Sleep, where we whisper through the past to help you drift into dreams. If you're new here, take a second to subscribe so you don't miss the next sleepy journey through history. And if you're already cozy under your blanket, let me know in the comments when you usually listen. Do you drift off right away, or do you make it halfway through before sleep takes you? Tell me what time of night you're joining us, and what topics you'd like to hear next. In this story, we'll wander through smoky longhouses lit by embers, listen to the soft breathing of sleeping families, and feel the rhythm of nights guided by firelight and cold air. You'll learn how Vikings balanced their bodies and minds with the natural world, without alarm clocks, electricity, or endless screens. So take a slow breath, let the day fade away, and imagine yourself beneath a fur blanket, the sound of wind and ocean outside. Because in the quiet of the Viking night, rest wasn't a struggle, it was a part of life itself. Now, let's begin our journey into the first chapter, where we step into the rhythm of a Viking day and discover how the natural world decided when they rose and when they dreamed. Before alarm clocks and fluorescent lights, the Vikings lived by a rhythm that belonged entirely to the earth. Their lives moved in tune with the sun, the moon, and the turning seasons. Every day began when the first light crept through the smoke hole in the roof of a longhouse, and ended when the last embers of the hearth dimmed to red. Their time was measured not in hours, but in tasks and light. This ancient sense of timing created something most modern people have lost: a body that knew, instinctively, when to wake, when to eat, and when to rest. In Scandinavia, the days could be endless in summer and painfully short in winter. The Vikings didn't resist this. Instead, they adapted to it. In June, when the sun barely set, they worked and feasted long into the twilight, sleeping in shorter bursts and rising early to use every moment of daylight. In December, the darkness brought a slower pace. The long nights encouraged lingering meals, stories, and extended rest. Sleep stretched out like the shadows, soft and uninterrupted by the noise of industry. Their bodies followed the world's rhythm naturally, not the artificial one dictated by schedules or alarms. The Viking day was simple and structured around survival. At dawn, the animals were tended, fires stoked, and bread baked. As the sun climbed higher, work filled the hours fields, fishing, craft, and trade. By evening, the scent of smoke and stew filled the longhouse. When the last chores were done, families gathered around the hearth. It was a time of stories, quiet carving, mending, or prayer. When the fire burned low, conversation slowed, and so did thought. The mind began to settle, guided toward rest by the soft glow of embers and the gentle fatigue of a day well spent. Unlike modern people, Vikings didn't struggle against their biology. The blue glow of dawn signaled wakefulness, while the warm hues of firelight coaxed the release of sleep hormones. Without screens, artificial lights, or caffeine to confuse it, the Viking body moved easily between states of labor and rest. Their nights began when darkness demanded it, and ended when the morning light insisted. The longhouse itself reinforced this natural balance. With its single central fire and narrow windows, the light inside changed with the sun. Mornings began dimly, with golden streaks of light cutting through rising smoke. By midday, the room was filled with movement and work. As dusk approached, the glow softened, inviting calm. There were no harsh lamps, no glowing clocks, only the slow fading of day into night. Every sense aligned with the coming of sleep. Seasonal variation also shaped their rest. During winter, when daylight was scarce, the Vikings entered what scholars now call the two-sleep pattern, a natural division of the night into two distinct periods of rest. The first sleep came soon after darkness, deep and heavy. The second began after a quiet waking period in the middle of the night, a time often spent talking softly, tending the fire, or simply lying still in thought. This rhythm wasn't a problem to be fixed. It was part of life. It allowed reflection, intimacy, and peace in the heart of darkness. Their relationship with time was not mechanical but alive. There was no sense of rushing to fit in tasks before a deadline, no anxious calculation of hours, lost or gained. The Viking world moved in cycles, not lines. Days were for doing, nights for resting, seasons for changing. This fluid rhythm gave their minds and bodies permission to breathe, to slow, to recover. The absence of constant stimulation and stress allowed the nervous system to find calm naturally. When darkness truly fell, it fell completely. Outside the longhouse, the land was silent except for the wind and the distant cry of an animal. The stars stretched endlessly above, their light ancient and cold. For the Vikings who believed the sky was the dome of Yggdrasil's great tree, night was not something to be feared. It was sacred. To sleep was to align oneself with that sacred quiet, to surrender to the same stillness that governed all of nature. Their sleep, in many ways, was not a retreat, but a return to rhythm, to peace, to balance. In a world ruled by natural order, the Vikings didn't need to fight for rest. It arrived softly and surely as the fire dimmed and the air cooled. The body knew, the mind obeyed, and the night carried them into dreams. In the next chapter, we'll step inside the Viking longhouse itself, a smoky, warm, and shared space where entire families slept side by side, and where the closeness of others was both comfort and necessity. To understand how the Vikings truly slept, we have to step inside their longhouses, the heart of their homes and lives. These were not quiet bedrooms separated by walls and doors. The Viking longhouse was a single elongated space made of timber, turf, or stone, stretching anywhere from 40 to 80 feet in length. Within those walls, families, servants, and even animals shared the same air, warmth, and rhythm of rest. Sleep in the Viking Age was not private. It was communal, and that closeness shaped the way they experienced comfort, safety, and connection. At the center of every longhouse burned the hearth. It was the anchor of life, the sole source of light, heat, and cooked food. As night fell, the fire's glow became the pulse of the home. Its soft crackling and gentle warmth soothed the senses. The flicker of the flames painted shifting shadows on the walls and ceiling beams, marking the slow transition from day to night. People gathered close to it as the cold deepened. There was no electric hum, no outside glow, only that single point of light in a world of darkness. The longhouse was divided into zones, though not by walls. Raised wooden platforms lined both sides of the hall, serving as benches by day and beds by night. Families laid out furs, blankets, and stuffed mattresses made from straw, moss, or feathers. These bedding layers absorbed the body's warmth and smelled faintly of earth, wood, and smoke. Lying close together meant sharing heat in the harsh Scandinavian winters, and even the livestock contributed. Cows, goats, and sheep often slept in the lower end of the hall, their bodies radiating warmth upward through the wooden floor. Privacy, as we think of it today, was almost unknown. The sounds of others, breathing, turning, whispering, these were the lullabies of Viking life. For children, the comfort of parents nearby brought security. For adults, the nearness of kin and community reduced the fear of danger. Even in their most vulnerable state, they were never alone. The longhouse itself was a kind of living body, filled with the sounds and warmth of its inhabitants. To sleep within it was to belong. The rhythm of the night followed the fire. As its light dimmed, people drifted off naturally, lulled by the slow cooling of the air and the fading glow. There were no clocks to count the hours, only instinct and fatigue. If someone awoke during the dark middle hours, they might quietly tend the coals or shift the furs to cover a child. A soft murmur might pass between family members, or silence might stretch unbroken. Then, as dawn approached and the hearth was stirred back to life, the hall began to move again. First a few whispers, then the rustle of straw, and the lowing of animals ready for the day. This shared way of sleeping shaped not only rest, but social connection. The longhouse was a physical reminder that survival depended on togetherness. No one truly rested unless everyone did. The Vikings believed in community as a shield against both the elements and the unknown. The warmth of bodies and breath, the closeness of kin, created a form of peace modern life rarely allows. For those living in modern isolation, the thought of sleeping surrounded by others might seem uncomfortable. But for the Vikings, loneliness was far more unnatural. Human beings evolved to sleep in groups, to feel safe under the soft rhythm of shared breathing. That ancient instinct still lingers deep within us, a whisper that perhaps the Vikings, for all their roughness, knew something we've forgotten, that peace often comes from proximity, not solitude. The scent of the hearth, the murmur of voices, the faint movement of fur blankets, all of these created a sensory cocoon that signaled rest. The fire's orange glow danced gently on faces, softening expressions until even the fiercest warrior looks childlike in sleep. Night was a time when strength gave way to softness, when the longhouse breathed slowly and evenly, as if it too slept. This communal sleep also reflected the Viking worldview. They saw life as woven together family, labor, worship, and rest all part of the same fabric. There was no division between personal and communal space, no retreat from the group. Their rest was social as much as physical, and that shared experience deepened bonds that carried them through the hardships of their daily existence. In those long winter nights, under layers of fur and straw, the Vikings found comfort not through luxury, but through belonging. Their longhouses were simple, smoky, and rough, but they offered something far rarer: warmth of the body and warmth of the heart intertwined. In the next chapter, we'll let the fire dim further and explore how the flicker of firelight itself and the absence of harsh artificial light played a vital role in helping Viking minds drift peacefully into sleep. When the day's work ended and twilight settled across the Viking world, light came only from the hearth and small oil lamps. The soft glow of fire was not just a necessity, it was medicine for the mind. That dim, flickering warmth told the body that the day was over and that it was time to rest. Firelight, unlike modern electric bulbs or glowing screens, moves in rhythms that comfort rather than stimulate. It soothes the eyes and slows the heartbeat. The Vikings, without knowing any science of sleep, were surrounded every night by the perfect natural signal to drift into calm. The longhouse's fire burned at the center, its light dancing over wooden beams and woven cloth. Shadows stretched and rippled across the walls like waves. The air was smoky, scented with pine resin and peat. As night deepened, the flames were fed less often, the glow softening from orange to red to the deep black of embers. This gradual darkening mirrored the natural decline of daylight. The body's inner clock followed easily, responding to the shift in light and temperature by releasing melatonin, the hormone that brings sleep. For Vikings, this rhythm happened without effort. Their brains were never exposed to the sharp, blue-white glare that now floods modern homes at all hours. The firelight of the hearth, or the faint glimmer of an oil lamp made from fish oil or animal fat, was enough to see by, but never enough to disturb the delicate balance of rest. Modern science has shown that firelight sits at the red-orange end of the spectrum, the color range that encourages relaxation and tells the body night has come. Without knowing the terms, The Vikings lived by this truth every day. The effect of this nightly ritual was more than biological, it was psychological. As people gathered around the hearth after a long day, conversation slowed, laughter softened, and stories began. The glow of the fire created intimacy. It framed faces gently, blurring the hard lines of daylight. The dancing light felt alive, almost breathing, and it pulled everyone into its rhythm. Even the act of watching it, the hypnotic movement of flame and smoke, quieted the mind. The Vikings often told stories in this light, sagas of gods and ancestors. Each word rose and fell like the flicker of the flame, lulling listeners toward a peaceful state somewhere between waking and dreaming. There were also oil lamps, carved from stone or shaped from iron, burning animal fat with a simple wick. Their flames were small but steady, casting soft halos of light. Each lamp burned for hours, and their faint smoke mixed with the smell of wool and wood. In wealthier homes, a few might be lit at once during feasts, but for ordinary families, a single lamp could light the night. The flame's gentle pulse became the heartbeat of the room, and its dying glow was the signal to close one's eyes. The Vikings' relationship with fire was spiritual as well as practical. In Norse mythology, fire was sacred, both creation and destruction. The warmth of the hearth symbolized life, safety, and community. To let the fire die completely was to invite cold, hunger, and danger. At night, when the world outside was ruled by frost and shadow, the living flame was a guardian spirit. Its light marked the boundary between the safety of home and the wilderness beyond. Falling asleep to its glow was an act of trust, a surrender to the rhythm of the world. Without constant artificial brightness, their nights followed a true cycle of dimming and dark. Eyes adjusted naturally. The mind accepted night as a time of quiet rather than stimulation. In contrast, the modern world blurs day and night, keeping our brains trapped in endless daylight, tricked into alertness long past the hour of rest. The Vikings didn't need to struggle to wind down. Their environment did it for them. The fire's fading glow, the cooling air, the silence outside all whispered the same message. It is time. Even the sounds of fire added to the experience. The soft crackle, the hiss of sap, the occasional shift of a log, these tiny, unpredictable noises create a natural pattern that calms the nervous system. It's the same reason many people today use recordings of crackling fires to relax. But for the Vikings, it wasn't a luxury soundscape. It was life itself. The fire's voice was constant, protective, and deeply familiar. Imagine lying beneath firs, the air cool and heavy with the scent of smoke, eyes half open as the fire fades. The shadows move gently across the ceiling beams, slowing until they disappear. There is no clock, no buzzing phone, no bright streetlight leaking through curtains. Only the deep rhythm of breath, the slow beat of your heart, and the memory of the fire still glowing behind your eyelids. The Vikings may not have known it, but their way of life preserved the kind of natural sleep our bodies still crave, a state of rest guided by warmth, darkness, and the living pulse of flame. In the next chapter, we'll look at what those Vikings actually slept on, the surprising comfort of straw, moss, and fur, and how simple materials made for deep restorative sleep. In a world without mattresses, springs, or pillows filled with feathers from distant lands, the Vikings still found ways to make their rest deeply comfortable. Their bedding was built from the land itself, soft moss, dried straw, animal furs, and wool blankets, each layer chosen with care and instinct. Though simple, these natural materials created a sleep environment that was warm, breathable, and surprisingly restful. To lie down in a Viking bed was to sink into the textures of nature, surrounded by scents of pine, smoke, and earth. The raised platforms that lined each side of the longhouse served as both seating and sleeping spaces. They were built from wooden planks, sometimes covered with woven mats of reeds or rushes. On top of these came thick layers of straw, which trapped warmth and cushioned the body. Moss was added for softness and insulation. It held heat and wicked away moisture. Over that, people spread furs and blankets, often made from sheepskin or reindeer hide. These layers adjusted naturally to the temperature, keeping sleepers warm in the long Scandinavian winters and cool during the mild summers. For the Vikings, bedding wasn't just practical, it was personal. Families took pride in maintaining it, shaking out straw and airing furs during the day. Bedding could even be part of dowries or family inheritance, passed down through generations. To give someone a fine blanket or well-made wool cover was a gesture of care and respect. Each bed, though simple, was crafted with the same balance of function and meaning that defined Viking life. The smell and texture of natural materials created an atmosphere that modern synthetic fabrics can rarely match. Straw gave off a faintly sweet scent, while furs carried the musk of the animal and the smoky warmth of the hearth. The air inside the longhouse was filled with these earthy aromas, comforting reminders of the world outside, of the fields and forests that sustained them. For the Vikings, the boundary between nature and home was soft. They brought the land indoors, not just for warmth, but to stay connected to it even in sleep. Wool was another essential part of Viking bedding. Thick wool blankets, spun and woven by hand, covered families at night. Wool's natural properties made it nearly perfect. It retained heat even when damp, breathed easily, and resisted dirt. In a climate where cold could be deadly, these blankets were as valuable as weapons or tools. Wealthier households might have dyed wool in muted colors, rust red, deep brown, or gray blue, but most kept it natural, blending with the tones of wood and smoke. Pillows were rarer and more luxurious. When they existed, they were stuffed with soft moss, feathers, or fine wool. More often, a folded cloak or rolled-up tunic served as head support. It might sound rough by modern standards, but the Vikings' necks and backs were accustomed to this simplicity. Their days were filled with movement and labor. Their bodies were strong, their sleep deep. A stiff pillow was not a concern when fatigue ran through the muscles and warmth surrounded you. Even their sleeping positions reflected both practicality and closeness. Families and servants often lay side by side, wrapped in shared blankets, facing the hearth for warmth. Children nestled between parents, and elders rested near the walls where the heat lingered longest. This arrangement created layers of comfort, physical warmth, emotional safety, and the soft, steady presence of others breathing nearby. When it was time to rest, no one worried about making the room silent or perfectly dark. The crackle of fire, the occasional creak of wood, or the quiet movement of an animal added to the sense of life continuing through the night. The Vikings accepted imperfection in their environment. Their sleep came not from control, but from adaptation. They didn't fight noise, temperature, or light. They flowed with them, letting their bodies adjust naturally. There's something profoundly grounding about the simplicity of their bedding. Modern sleep is often surrounded by excess, mattresses with endless layers, chemical scents, synthetic fibers. The Vikings slept on what was around them, and their bodies were in harmony with those materials. The cool of the wood, the softness of moss, the weight of wool, all worked together to create comfort without complication. Their beds were not about luxury, but balance. At the end of each day, as the fire dimmed and the hall grew quiet, a Viking might pull a fur up to their chin, feel the warmth spread from the straw below, and exhale into the soft darkness. The smell of the hearth and the faint chill of the air made sleep feel earned. Every layer of bedding carried the memory of the day, the scent of hay, the echo of footsteps, the rhythm of labor. To rest on that was to return to the earth's calm embrace. Their beds might seem primitive to us, but in many ways they were closer to perfect. They supported deep, natural rest, guided by texture, scent, and warmth. The Vikings slept surrounded by life itself, and that connection brought peace. In the next chapter, we'll explore how the Vikings didn't just sleep once a night, but twice, following an ancient pattern of 2 sleeps. That reveals how humans may have been designed to rest in cycles, not in one long stretch. Before the invention of electricity, people all over the world, including the Vikings, followed a rhythm of rest that would seem strange to modern eyes. It was called segmented sleep, or what scholars now call the 2 sleeps pattern. The idea of sleeping through the night in one unbroken stretch is a relatively new habit. For the Vikings, sleep came in 2 gentle waves, separated by a quiet hour or 2 of peaceful wakefulness in the middle of the night. This ancient rhythm fit perfectly with the slow, natural world they lived in, and it may be one of the reasons their sleep was deeper, calmer, and more restorative than ours today. The first sleep began soon after darkness fell. In the long winters of the north, that might mean drifting off as early as 6 or 7 in the evening. The fire's glow would fade, conversations would soften, and the hall would fall still. This first stretch of rest was heavy and deep, the kind that pulled the body completely into stillness. During this phase, the Vikings' bodies repaired muscles worn from work and replenished their energy. It was a physical rest, a surrender to fatigue. Then, sometime after midnight, many would wake naturally, not from noise or discomfort, but because their bodies were ready. The first sleep had done its work. In the stillness, people stirred. They might rise to tend the fire, check on animals, or sit quietly, listening to the wind outside. Some used this time for prayer or reflection. Others whispered to those lying nearby, speaking softly in the dark. This period between sleeps was not seen as insomnia or a problem. It was part of the natural rhythm of the night. Historians and sleep researchers have found that this midnight waking was common across pre-industrial societies, described even centuries later in diaries and letters. It was a time of peace, of thought, of intimacy. For the Vikings, who believed the night connected them to the divine, these hours held special meaning. Dreams from the first sleep might still linger, their symbols alive in the quiet. Some used the time to meditate on omens, to recall the faces of ancestors, or to whisper simple thanks for warmth and safety. After this calm interlude came the second sleep. It began naturally, without effort, as the fire dimmed again and the air cooled. This sleep was lighter, filled with dreams and reflection. In the safety of the longhouse, wrapped in wool and fur, the Vikings drifted through a different kind of rest, one that restored the spirit. When morning light touched the smoke hole above, they rose slowly, their bodies rested, and their minds clear. Modern research suggests that this 2-part sleep aligns closely with human biology. When people live by natural light, without electric bulbs or screens, the body tends to settle into this rhythm on its own. The long winter nights of Scandinavia made it especially practical. By embracing the darkness rather than resisting it, the Vikings found a natural balance between activity and rest, waking and dreaming. The middle period between sleeps may also have strengthened their social bonds. Families lying side by side in the dark could share quiet words, secrets, or laughter. In the stillness, relationships deepened. Couples often used this time for intimacy, while others simply lay awake, thinking or humming softly. It was a kind of nightly meditation, a moment where the mind could wander without pressure or fear of sleeplessness. This gentle cycle of sleeping, waking, and sleeping again created a relationship with night that was tender rather than anxious. Today, when people wake in the middle of the night, they often feel frustration or worry about the lost hours. But for the Vikings, it was natural. The night was long, generous, and forgiving. It was time for everything: rest, reflection, and return to sleep. The 2 sleeps pattern also reveals something deeper about how the Vikings viewed time itself. It wasn't something to be maximized or conquered. It was something to move within. The world had its own pulse, and they followed it. When darkness stretched on for half the year, they didn't fight it, they adapted. Their bodies moved with the rhythm of firelight, food, and fatigue. The night was not an obstacle, but a companion. Imagine the quiet of a Viking longhouse during that in-between hour. The air cool and still, the faint glow of coals painting red circles in the dark. A few slow breaths, the rustle of fur, a low murmur of words barely above a whisper. Then, gradually, the sound of movement fades. The fire burns low, and the hall slips back into silence. The second sleep begins. The Vikings, at one with the rhythm of their world, surrender again to dreams. In that pattern too sleeps. One night they found what many of us now chase, a sleep guided not by schedules or alarms, but by the soft wisdom of the body and the turning of the earth. In the next chapter, we'll explore how their diet and feasting habits, rich in meat, fish, and mead, played an unexpected role in shaping the quality of their rest. For the Vikings, food was not just nourishment, it was life, strength, and celebration. Every meal reflected the seasons, the land, and the rhythm of work. Their diet was hearty and natural, built on what they could grow, catch, or preserve. And though they lived without modern science, the way they ate supported deep, steady sleep in ways our modern habits often do not. Their feasts and everyday meals alike prepared the body for rest, calming the mind and satisfying the senses before the fire dimmed. Viking meals were built around simplicity and substance. In the northern cold, energy was precious. Bread baked from barley or rye, stews thick with root vegetables, salted fish, roasted meats, and rich dairy products filled their days. Each meal was slow and deliberate. Ingredients were fresh, unprocessed, and eaten close to the time of harvest or hunt. Even their drinks, mead, ale, and milk, were natural products of fermentation and labor, grounding their bodies in the cycle of nature. This balance between physical exertion and natural food created an ideal foundation for restful sleep. The evening meal, eaten by the glow of firelight, was the most communal and satisfying of the day. After hours of physical labor, the body craved warmth and fullness. A typical supper might include a thick stew of lamb or pork, flavored with herbs and onions, served with coarse bread and butter. The heat of the food, the soft flicker of the hearth, and the rhythmic murmur of conversation all guided the body toward relaxation. Unlike modern people who often rush or eat distractedly, the Vikings ate slowly, talking and listening, letting digestion unfold in peace. Mead, their beloved honey wine, played a special role in their evenings. It was sweet, calming, and lightly intoxicating. The gentle buzz of alcohol, paired with the warmth of the hall, helped muscles relax and tension melt away. But unlike modern overindulgence, Viking drinking was often controlled by ritual and occasion. They toasted gods, ancestors, and guests in structured rounds, with pauses in conversation between each drink. The result was a sense of calm unity rather than chaos, a soft descent into comfort. Their foods were also rich in natural nutrients that support sleep. Fatty fish from the cold northern seas provided omega-3 south and vitamin D, helping to regulate hormones like serotonin and melatonin. Whole grains and legumes released energy slowly through the night, preventing blood sugar spikes that can disturb rest. Even their use of herbs like dill, fennel, and juniper added compounds that soothed the stomach and nerves. Without planning or supplements, the Vikings had built a diet that worked in harmony with the body's natural needs. During winter, feasts became even more significant. When the world outside was frozen and days were short, communities gathered indoors for long, warm evenings of eating and storytelling. These feasts were not just celebrations. They were essential acts of survival, binding families and neighbors together through the dark. The heavy meals, dense with fat and meat, provided insulation against the cold and triggered a sense of deep fullness that encouraged long, dream-filled sleep. After the final toasts were given, and songs faded into silence. The fire burned low, and one by one, people drifted off. The night after a feast was a time of pure surrender to rest. Even their sense of timing around food supported natural rhythms. The Vikings did not snack constantly or eat late into the night. Meals were tied to the sun, not the clock. By the time darkness arrived, their bodies were ready, not stuffed, not starved, but satisfied. Their digestion aligned with the day's energy, and by bedtime, their systems were winding down. In contrast, modern life often breaks this balance. Late-night eating, caffeine, and stress confuse the body's signals. The Vikings, without such distractions, let nature guide their appetite. Feasting also carried emotional weight. It was a time of laughter, gratitude, and shared joy. That sense of togetherness soothed the spirit, easing the kind of loneliness and anxiety that often disrupts modern rest. To go to sleep after a feast was to feel part of something larger, a family, a community, a world of order and meaning. That comfort settled deep into the body, turning each night into a return to safety. Even on ordinary days, their modest suppers were grounding. Warm porridge, dried fish, or broth with herbs filled the stomach and settled the nerves. The flavors were familiar and earthy. There were no sudden bursts of sugar or caffeine, no rush of artificial energy. Every meal, in its own quiet way, was an act of rhythm, a reminder of the steady pulse of life and the body's harmony with it. Imagine the end of a long Viking day, the air cool and smoky, the last bowl scraped clean, the laughter fading into murmurs. A mug of mead sits half-finished near the fire. Outside, frost gathers on the grass, and inside, warmth lingers in bellies and bones. The body, heavy with satisfaction, sinks into fur and straw. Sleep comes not as an effort, but as an aftertaste of peace. In the next chapter, we'll look at another reason Viking sleep came so easily, the sheer physical exhaustion of their days, the kind of deep earned fatigue that made every night's rest feel like a blessing. If there is one thing that defined Viking life beyond the ships and sagas, it was work. Every sunrise brought motion lifting, hauling, carving, mending, walking, chopping, rowing. The Vikings did not have sedentary days. Their lives demanded constant effort from body and mind, a steady rhythm of movement that left them genuinely weary by nightfall. This was not the restless exhaustion of modern stress, but the clean, satisfying fatigue that comes from labor done with purpose. That kind of tiredness carries no anxiety, no racing thoughts. It is the kind that welcomes sleep as a natural reward. From the moment light entered the longhouse, the day began with physical action. Men and women alike rose early to tend to animals, gather water, and stoke fires. Farmers walked the fields with heavy tools, shaping earth hardened by frost. Fishermen pushed out into icy waters, rowing for hours through wind and waves. Artisans bent over iron, wood, or wool, their hands and shoulders working tirelessly. Every movement had meaning, every task connected to survival. The Viking body was built for use, and by dusk, it had earned rest in every muscle and bone. Unlike the abstract stress of modern work emails, deadlines, screens, the Vikings' exhaustion was tangible. Their effort was physical, and the reward immediate. When they lay down at night, there were no glowing lights, no urgent thoughts, no constant hum of information. There was only silence, the memory of work completed, and the body's deep desire to recover. This connection between exertion and rest is one reason ancient sleep came easily. They did not fight their own energy. They used it fully, and then they let go. The natural light cycles also shaped their rhythm. During summer, when the sun stretched nearly around the clock, workdays were long and filled with energy. Sleep came in shorter bursts, yet it remained satisfying. In winter, when the sun barely rose, work slowed, and nights lengthened into deep, unbroken rest. The Vikings didn't struggle against the seasons. They let their routines flow with them. This harmony with the earth as timing gave their bodies the balance that modern life so often disrupts. Physical labor also released stress in ways our modern lifestyles can't replicate. The act of rowing a ship or chopping wood expelled tension through motion. By the time the sun fell, the mind was as tired as the body, but peacefully so. They didn't need guided meditations or sleep aids. The day itself was their therapy. The rhythm of work followed by warmth, food, and rest was deeply ingrained, creating a dependable cycle that soothed both body and spirit. Even the mental labor of Viking life carried its own form of balance. Planning for seasons, repairing tools, caring for livestock, all of it was done with hands and eyes, not screens or noise. The pace of life was slower, but full. The Vikings didn't rush to fill time. They filled it naturally. The absence of endless distraction meant that by night, their minds were quiet. They were tired, but not overstimulated. The difference between those two states is everything when it comes to sleep. Imagine a Viking at the end of a long day. Hands rough from work, shoulders sore from rowing or plowing, hair smelling faintly of smoke. The fire crackles in the hearth. The air outside is cold and silent. Within moments of lying down, the body sinks, every muscle loosening. There are no thoughts of unfinished tasks or glowing reminders of tomorrow. Only warmth, fatigue, and gravity pulling them into rest. This kind of exhaustion was not without beauty. It gave meaning to their days. Labor connected them to the land, to their homes, and to each other. Even children worked, carrying small buckets of water or tending sheep, and they too slept soundly when night came. The human body, built for effort, responded with gratitude to sleep. Each day's work reset the cycle. Modern people often chase rest through stillness, yet the Vikings achieved it through movement. They worked hard enough that their bodies demanded sleep, and when rest came, it came deeply. The mind followed the body's lead, slowing down in rhythm with the fading firelight. There were no alarms, no guilt, no fight to get enough sleep. There was simply the balance of effort and reward, the rhythm of nature and need. And so, in the Viking world, sleep was not something to be chased. It was something that arrived faithfully, because it had been earned. The body, having done its share of the day's work, surrendered easily to the night. In the next chapter, we'll leave the longhouse walls and step into the quiet of the Viking night itself, to explore how silence, darkness, and the untouched sounds of nature created a world of calm modern people can barely imagine. When night fell in the Viking world, it was truly dark and truly quiet. There were no engines in the distance, no streetlights humming, no digital beeps, or the endless static of city life. The silence of the past was not an absence, but a presence, deep and alive. It surrounded the longhouse like a blanket, layered with natural sounds. The sigh of wind through grass, the crackle of the hearth, the soft breath of animals sleeping nearby. For the Vikings, this soundscape of stillness was the background music of every night, and it guided their bodies gently toward rest. Silence, as we know it today, has become a rare luxury. But for the Vikings, it was the default state of the world. After sunset, human activity slowed to almost nothing. Villages dimmed, the fires in nearby homes flickered low, and the only light came from the moon or the stars reflected in water. Without artificial noise or light, the mind followed the same path as the day. It dimmed, quieted, and released its hold on wakefulness. The human body, so sensitive to sound, responded in kind. Heart rates slowed, breathing deepened. This natural stillness was not something they created, it was the world's gift. Outside the longhouse, the Nordic landscape offered its own soft lullabies. The wind moving through pine trees, the distant crash of waves against rocks, the occasional call of a night bird, each sound came slowly and naturally, fading into long stretches of silence. Even those who lived near larger settlements would hear little beyond the soft footfall of an animal or the creak of wooden beams. The Viking ear, attuned to nature, did not crave constant input. Their nights were filled with the kind of quiet that modern minds now find almost unsettling. Inside the longhouse, the sounds were few and gentle. The soft rhythm of breathing, the low rumble of a snoring ox, the crackle of coals settling in the hearth. These noises were predictable, familiar, and safe. They created what scientists today call consistent sound patterns, which help the brain relax and reduce startle responses. The Vikings may not have had the words for it, but their homes were perfectly tuned for rest. There were no sudden noises, no mechanical interruptions, nothing to jar the senses from the calm flow of sleep. Even the sound of the wind outside added to the peace rather than breaking it. The thick turf walls and thatched roofs muffled harsh weather, turning the howling cold into a soft, distant hum. It reminded those inside of their safety, their warmth, their shelter from the elements. The Vikings understood this contrast instinctively. Outside was the untamed world, fierce and unpredictable. Inside was order, warmth, and calm. This awareness made the quiet of night feel sacred. Their lack of constant stimulation also protected their hearing and nerves. Modern people often live surrounded by low-level noise pollution traffic, electronics, even the buzz of lights that keeps the body slightly alert at all times. The Vikings lived in a silence so deep that their nervous systems could fully relax. Their nights were restorative, not just because of darkness and warmth, but because their senses were free to rest. The absence of noise allowed true stillness, both around and within. The mental effect of this quiet was profound. Without sound or light to pull the mind outward, attention turned inward, thoughts slowed and deepened. Dreams grew vivid and memorable. The Vikings placed importance on dreams, believing they could carry messages from ancestors or the gods. The silence of their nights allowed those dreams to surface clearly, undisturbed by the chaos of sound that fills modern sleep. The quiet did not just help them rest, it helped them connect to something larger, to mystery and meaning. Imagine lying under furs in the darkness of a Viking night. The only light is the faint orange glow of embers, the only sound a slow exhale beside you. Beyond the wooden walls, snow falls silently, blanketing the earth in deeper stillness. There is no rumble of traffic, no ticking clock, no restless hum. Just the rhythm of your breath and the slow heartbeat of the fire dying low. That silence becomes a companion, not an emptiness. You can feel it around you, pressing softly like water, filling the space between thoughts until only peace remains. The Vikings lived in a world where rest was not fought for. It arrived naturally because nothing stood in its way. The absence of noise allowed their bodies to reset fully each night, restoring energy and calm. In that stillness, they found balance not just in their sleep, but in their spirit. In the next chapter, we'll see how the extremes of the northern season's endless summer days and near-eternal winter nights shaped the Viking relationship with sleep even further, teaching them to adapt to nature's wildest rhythms. For the Vikings, the passing of seasons was more than just a change in weather. It was a shift in the very rhythm of life, work, and rest. Their sleep, like everything else in their world, followed the sun. In summer, daylight lingered almost endlessly, brushing the edges of night, but never fully surrendering to darkness. In winter, the opposite ruled. Long, black nights stretched for hours upon hours, with the sun rising weakly and setting early. To live in the far north meant surrendering to this rhythm, letting light and darkness decide when to wake, when to work, and when to dream. In the heart of the Scandinavian summer, night barely existed. The sky turned pale but never black, and the horizon glowed faintly even at midnight. The Vikings worked through this light with remarkable energy, driven by the brief warmth and abundance of the season. Sleep came in shorter bursts, sometimes in 2 or 3 intervals, spread through the day and night. They might rest after midday meals or nap in the cool shade before evening work began again. The constant light did not disturb them. It simply changed their pattern. Their bodies adjusted naturally, following the cues of warmth, hunger, and fatigue rather than the clock. The energy of summer carried a feeling of life and urgency. Crops needed tending, boats needed to sail, trade had to be done before the cold returned. Sleep, though shorter, was refreshing because it followed honest labor and natural fatigue. The air itself seemed alive, filled with birdsong and wind, and the Vikings moved in harmony with it. They knew rest would come fully when the light faded again in autumn. Summer was for motion, for gathering, for burning bright. Then came winter, and the rhythm reversed completely. Darkness covered the land for most of the day. The sun rose late, hanging low like a faint memory of fire, then vanished again before supper. In this deep, frozen stillness, life slowed to a crawl. Travel stopped. Fields lay sleeping under snow. Inside longhouses, fires burned low and steady, and people stayed close together, their days shaped by quiet domestic work-mending tools, carving wood, preparing food for the months ahead. Sleep expanded to fill the long hours of darkness. Winter sleep was heavier, dreamier, and more spiritual. The Vikings believed that the long nights brought them closer to the unseen world, the realm of gods, spirits, and ancestors. They might wake in the middle of the night to speak softly of dreams or omens, to interpret the visions brought by darkness. This was not fear, but reverence. The silence and the endless night created a kind of calm that allowed the imagination to wander freely. The body rested, and the mind traveled. Seasonal variation also strengthened the Viking sense of time. They didn't fight against long nights or short days. They embraced them as part of nature as balance. When the world offered light, they used it fully. When it offered darkness, they rested deeply. Modern life, with its artificial lights and fixed schedules, often denies this rhythm, pushing us to be the same every day of the year. The Vikings knew better. They let the earth lead, and in doing so, found balance that few people today ever experience. Even their architecture reflected this relationship with the seasons. The longhouse, with its thick walls and small windows, kept out cold winds in winter, but stayed dim and cool in summer. The fire at its center was adjusted with the turning of the year burning fiercely when frost covered the world, fading to coals when the air grew mild. The light and warmth inside mirrored the changing sky outside, teaching the body to move through the year in tune with the land. The changing seasons also affected their mood and health, though not in the same anxious ways modern people experience. The Vikings expected the slow pace of winter and the frenzy of summer. They didn't demand constant productivity or endless comfort. Each season had its role. Summer was for life and expansion. Winter was for reflection and recovery. This acceptance turned sleep into a kind of spiritual rhythm, not just a biological need. Imagine the depth of a Viking winter night, the world outside completely black, the roof heavy with snow, the fire glowing softly beneath its shroud of smoke. The air inside is thick and warm, heavy with the scent of wood and wool. Families lie close together under blankets, the sound of breathing and crackling fire blending with the wind outside. There is nowhere to go, nothing to rush toward. Only darkness and the slow, quiet heartbeat of the season. And then, half a year later, picture the same longhouse filled with light, the sun spilling through the smoke hole long past midnight. The air is alive with insects, laughter, and warmth. The people are tanned, strong, and awake deep into the night, their bodies vibrant with energy. Sleep will come later, softer and shorter, when the body insists. The Vikings lived between these two worlds of time, one of endless day, one of endless night, and they found peace in both. Their rest changed shape with the turning of the earth, proving that good sleep was never about control, but about harmony. In the next chapter, we'll wander into the mysterious realm of dreams and Norse mythology, where the Vikings believed that what happened in sleep could reveal the will of the gods themselves. To the Vikings, dreams were not random or meaningless. They were messages. In the dim quiet of their nights, when the fire burned low and the mind drifted beyond the edge of waking, they believed that the gods, spirits, and ancestors could whisper through visions. Sleep was not just rest. It was a sacred crossing between the seen and unseen worlds. The Norse mind treated dreams with respect and awe, believing that what came in the night could carry truth, warning, or destiny. The sagas and poems of the Viking Age are filled with dreams that shaped lives. Kings dreamed of wolves devouring their lands, and soon after, enemies rose. Farmers dreamed of ships on fire, and the next morning saw sails on the horizon. Dreams were both prophecy and poetry, bound tightly to the Norse sense of fate, the weave of the Norns, the three mysterious women who spun the threads of every life. In the Viking imagination, sleep was not an escape from the world, but a way to glimpse the pattern of destiny itself. This belief made dreaming an active part of their spiritual life. When a Viking awoke from a vivid dream, they might share it around the hearth the next morning. Elders and seers, often wise women known as vulvas, would listen carefully, interpreting the symbols. A dream of a storm could mean anger from Thor. A dream of a bright meadow might signal the favor of Freya. The boundaries between gods and mortals blurred in sleep, and the Vikings treated those visions as guidance, not fantasy. Because their nights were so dark and their lives so steeped in myth, these dreams carried a special power. Imagine lying beneath firs, the wind howling outside, the hall lit only by a few red coals. In that world of flickering shadows, it would be easy to believe that unseen spirits hovered close. Sleep came not as a barrier against fear, but as a bridge toward it, an acceptance that the night belonged to more than just the living. The Vikings did not divide the world neatly into material and spiritual. Everything had a hidden layer, and dreams were one of the ways to glimpse it. In Norse thought, the soul itself was complex. They believed a person had several parts: the hugur, which carried thought and will; the fylgja, a kind of spirit or animal companion; and the hammer, a shape or essence that could move beyond the body. In dreams, these parts could wander. A warrior might see himself in another land, hunting or fighting, and wake believing his spirit had traveled there. This belief gave sleep a sacred weight. It was not a passive state, but an adventure of the spirit. The dream world was woven into the same fabric as Midgard, the world of humans, and Asgard, the realm of the gods. To fall asleep was to step quietly across a threshold. Many Vikings prayed before sleeping, asking for good dreams or protection from bad ones. They might call upon Frigg, goddess of foresight, or Odin, the great wanderer who himself sought wisdom through altered states and visions. Odin, above all, was the dreamer god. He hung for 9 nights on Yggdrasil, the world tree, between life and death, seeking knowledge of the runes. He was the master of hidden insight, the one who saw through dreams what others could not. To the Vikings, dreaming was a small echo of that divine experience, a chance to see beyond the surface of the world, to taste the knowledge that lay in mystery. Not all dreams were comforting, of course. Some were warnings. A dream of death, sickness, or blood might drive someone to seek ritual cleansing or make offerings to ward off misfortune. In a time when life was fragile, dreams were taken seriously. They could move entire households to change plans, postpone voyages, or prepare for conflict. Yet even in fear, there was respect. The Vikings did not try to escape the power of dreams. They honored it. This reverence for dreams also shaped how they spoke of death. The dead appeared in sleep, not as ghosts to haunt, but as guides to comfort or warn. Ancestors were thought to visit their descendants, offering protection or advice. Such dreams were seen as blessings, signs that the bonds of kinship stretched beyond the grave. The boundary between worlds was thin, and sleep was the doorway between them. The quiet of the Viking night made all of this possible. With no glare of light or hum of machines, the mind could drift deeply into that liminal space between waking and oblivion. Their dreams were vivid, rich with images of sea, sky, and fire reflections of the landscape they knew so well. In a sense, their entire world, awake or asleep, was poetic. The same elements that shaped their days shaped their nights. To sleep, for a Viking, was to let go of the body but not of the world. It was to travel, to listen, to learn. And when morning came, the first sound of the fire being stirred would pull them gently back into waking life, where stories of the night became wisdom for the day. In the next chapter, we'll stay in that sacred space a little longer and explore how the Vikings connected rest itself to their gods, how sleep like death was a gift and a reflection of divine order in their mythology. For the Vikings, every element of life birth, battle, harvest, and death was bound to the divine. Rest was no exception. Sleep was not merely a human need, but a sacred rhythm, a small reflection of the cosmic order established by the gods. In their mythology, even the mightiest beings rested, dreamed, and sought renewal. To close one's eyes was to participate in the same eternal cycle that guided the heavens and the earth. In Norse belief, the gods themselves were not distant or detached. They lived with human-like needs, emotions, and limits. Odin sought wisdom through sacrifice and endured exhaustion to gain knowledge. Thor rested after battles that shook the skies. Freya, goddess of love and fertility, presided over peace and pleasure as much as war. Sleep, to the Vikings, was a part of that divine balance, a pause between acts of strength. Just as day followed night, labor followed rest. One could not exist without the other. The connection between sleep and divinity also came through ritual. Many Vikings offered quiet prayers before lying down, whispering thanks for the day's safety and asking for protection during the night. The darkness was seen as a liminal time when the veil between worlds thinned and unseen spirits roamed freely. Calling upon the gods ensured the household's safety until dawn. In some regions, people placed small charms near their beds, carved runes or simple symbols to invite good dreams or ward off wandering souls. Frigg, wife of Odin, was one of the deities most closely associated with foresight and rest. As the goddess of household order and motherhood, she represented peace within the home. Women often invoked her name before sleep, trusting her to watch over families through the long winter nights. To rest under her care was an act of faith, a belief that the night would be kind. In her silence, Frigg embodied the stillness that follows chaos, the calm breath after a storm. Odin himself was a god of dreams and wisdom, a wanderer who often sought knowledge through altered states, half waking, half asleep. He was said to send dreams as messages to mortals, especially to kings and seers. The sagas tell of warriors who dreamed of Odin before great battles, receiving warnings or promises of victory. To sleep deeply enough to dream vividly was, in their view, to open oneself to the voice of the Allfather. The Vikings also tied the act of sleeping to their understanding of death. They saw life and death as mirrors, two halves of the same journey. Sleep was called the Little Death, a nightly rehearsal for the long rest that awaited all souls. Yet this was not morbid or fearful. To them, death was not an end but a transformation. Each night's sleep was a miniature version of that cycle. Descent into darkness, stillness, and return with the dawn. It was a sacred echo of rebirth. Some sagas describe warriors resting before battle as if preparing for death itself. They would eat, drink, and sleep deeply, believing that both dreams and death were under the watch of the gods. If they were to fall in combat, their spirits would awaken in Valhalla, Odin's great hall, where eternal feasting and rest awaited. Even in their fiercest moments, the Vikings carried this faith that rest was a divine right, a promise of renewal after struggle. In daily life, this belief brought peace. The harshness of the northern world, the storms, the hunger, the constant labor, was balanced by a quiet trust that rest was sacred. When the fire dimmed and the hall fell silent, people believed they were not alone. The gods who had shaped the world were present in that silence, watching, dreaming, resting alongside them. The act of sleep was a kind of worship, an offering of surrender to the greater rhythm of existence. In a way, this spiritual connection made every Viking night feel eternal. The moment between wakefulness and dreams was the same moment between life and afterlife. The warmth of the hearth echoed the warmth of Valhalla's endless fires. The darkness outside mirrored the unknown beyond death, and each sunrise was a resurrection of light. Sleep was a daily return to cosmic balance. Even the landscapes of their mythology reflected this truth. The gods themselves rested in Asgard, protected by walls and surrounded by the quiet of the heavens. Beneath them lay Midgard, the world of men, and beyond that the shadowy lands of Hel, where souls slept in peace or sorrow. These layers of existence, light, life, and darkness, were reflected in every Viking's experience of day and night. Sleep became a reminder of that grand design, that everything must fade and return, that rest is not weakness, but wisdom. When a Viking closed their eyes at night, they were not merely escaping the world, they were participating in its divine rhythm. Each breath and heartbeat echoed the cycles of the gods. In rest, they found renewal. In darkness, meaning. In silence, the whisper of eternity. In the next chapter, we'll return to the human world and explore how sleep reflected the Viking social order, how your place by the fire you're bedding, and even the warmth you received at night, could reveal your ranked power and role within the community. Inside the Viking longhouse, even the act of sleeping reflected the social order that shaped their world. Rest was not only about comfort, it was about position, belonging, and respect. The way a Viking slept, where they lay, and beside whom they rested, told silent stories about power, family, and worth. In the warmth of the longhouse, hierarchy did not vanish when the fire dimmed. It was only softened by the quiet of the night. The Viking home was both shelter and symbol. Its design mirrored society, strong, communal, but clearly structured. The head of the household, often an older man or woman, slept closest to the hearth, the heart of warmth and life. This was both practical and symbolic. The hearth represented authority, stability, and divine favor, and the family's leaders occupied the space nearest it. Around them lay their immediate family, then servants, workers, and finally, animals near the outer walls. Even in rest, order was maintained. This arrangement ensured not only respect but safety. Those of higher rank were protected by the bodies of those around them, and in return, they offered care, guidance, and protection. The longhouse was more than a home, it was a living hierarchy under a single roof. The rhythm of sleep echoed that order. The low hum of breathing, the soft crackle of fire, the steady warmth that flowed outward like a heartbeat all reflected the unity and rank of Viking life. Wealth and status also shaped comfort. A chieftain or prosperous trader might sleep on thick furs of bear or reindeer, with layered bedding of wool and straw beneath. Their blankets could be dyed in rich colors, reds, deep browns, or soft blues, while the lower-ranking members of the household had simpler coverings, often made from undyed wool or rougher hides. Even the smallest details of rest spoke of one's place in the world. The more elaborate the bedding, the higher the status. In communal halls used for feasting or travel, sleeping arrangements became even more revealing. Guests of honor were placed closest to the fire or given a private space with a curtain for warmth and modesty. Lesser guests slept near the doors or on benches, where drafts slipped through the cracks of the timber walls. This was not cruelty, but custom. Position determined privilege, even in the quiet vulnerability of night. A person's place at rest was as meaningful as their seat at the feast table. But this order was not rigid in spirit. The Vikings valued fairness and hospitality. When travelers arrived, no matter their rank, they were offered warmth and food before anything else. To deny someone rest was to offend both guest and God. The laws of hospitality were sacred, binding all under the protection of Odin and Frigg. A stranger might sleep near the fire for one night, as honored company, before returning to the edges of the hall. In these small acts, the Vikings wove compassion into their hierarchy. For the enslaved, rest was harder won. Thralls, as they were called, lived under the authority of their masters, often sleeping in colder or separate areas of the longhouse, near the walls or entrances. Their bedding was rough, their nights shorter, and their work relentless. Yet even they found moments of peace in the shared warmth of the hall, the hum of voices fading into sleep. For all their differences, everyone under that roof shared the same fire, the same darkness, and the same dreams. The organization of sleeping spaces also reflected family bonds. Children slept close to parents for warmth and safety, learning from birth the rhythm of communal life. Older relatives might sleep nearby, passing down stories and wisdom in the half-awake hours between first and second sleep. Rest was not only physical, it was social, a time when the threads of kinship were strengthened by shared silence. In the long nights of winter, that closeness was essential for both survival and love. Even in large settlements, like trading towns or ship camps, the same principles applied. Warriors slept side by side in their ships or barracks, arranged by rank and role. The leader or helmsman often rested in the center or stern, surrounded by trusted men. This created a sense of safety and order, even in the chaos of travel or war. The closeness of bodies, the sound of breathing, and the shared warmth of wool cloaks reminded each fighter that they belonged to something greater than themselves. At night, when all grew quiet, the differences between master and servant, warrior and farmer, softened under the same blanket of darkness. The firelight cast every face in the same gentle glow. For a few hours, all shared the same rhythm of sleep, the same surrender to stillness, the same passage through dreams. The longhouse became a single body, breathing as one. The Vikings understood something modern societies often forget, that even hierarchy can coexist with connection. Their sleeping order mirrored their worldview, structured but interdependent, strong yet compassionate. Everyone, no matter their place, rested within the same circle of warmth. When dawn returned, those roles reawakened. The leader rose first to stir the fire, the servants followed, and life began again. But for those quiet hours of rest, the boundaries blurred. In the hush of night, all were equal before sleep. In the next chapter, we'll leave the hearth and step aboard the open sea, where Viking sailors learned to find rest amid waves and storms, sleeping lightly in the cradle of their wooden ships as the north winds sang them to dreams. For a people defined by their ships, the Vikings learned to rest wherever the waves allowed. The sea was their road, their livelihood, and often their home. To travel across rough northern waters in open vessels required endurance not just in waking hours, but also in moments of rest. Their voyages could last days, weeks, even months, with little comfort but the wood beneath them and the sky above. Yet even there, amid the cold spray and endless motion, the Vikings found ways to sleep. Their rest was brief, practical, and fearless, built on trust in their crew, their gods, and the rhythm of the sea itself. A Viking ship was a marvel of design, but not of comfort. The long ships that carried raiders and explorers across the North Sea were sleek and open, their hulls curved like the ribs of a great beast. There were no cabins, no covered decks, only benches and planks. When the time came to rest, the men made do with what they had. Cloaks doubled as blankets, shields as windbreaks, and ropes as pillows. They slept sitting upright or curled along the sides of the ship, wrapped in layers of wool and fur. The salty air bit at their faces, but the constant rocking of the waves became a lullaby. Rest on the sea was taken in shifts. The crew rotated duties so that some could sleep while others steered, bailed water, or watched for land. Each man knew the rhythm of his turn, closing his eyes when the world allowed, waking at the call of the helmsman or the creak of the oarlocks. It was not the deep sleep of home, but a series of short, essential pauses, moments to gather strength, to let exhaustion ebb just enough to continue. Yet somehow, this broken rhythm worked. Their bodies adapted, finding peace in motion and trust in their comrades. The soundscape of a Viking ship at night was unlike anything on land. The constant slosh of water against the hull, the hiss of wind through ropes, the occasional creak of timber, it all merged into a steady, organic pulse. For men used to silence, this was a different kind of quiet, filled with life and movement. The sea was a living companion, unpredictable yet familiar. When exhaustion pressed too hard, even the most alert sailor could drift into sleep, rocked gently by the same forces that could destroy him. During calmer journeys or long voyages of trade, ships sometimes anchored near shore, allowing for true rest. The crew would beach the vessel, pull it slightly inland, and set up temporary camps. There, fires burned, and sleep came more deeply. Men would spread their cloaks on sand or grass, grateful for stillness under the stars. The air smelled of salt, smoke, and pine. Laughter faded into yawns, and soon the rhythmic breath of sailors mixed with the sound of waves, a harmony of man and sea, labor and rest. When storms hit, rest disappeared entirely. Sleep became impossible amid thunder and crashing waves, when every hand was needed to steer and survive. Yet even then, the Vikings carried an acceptance that bordered on faith. The sea, they believed, was a realm of its own, ruled by powers far beyond them, sure. The god of the ocean and his wife Ran, who gathered drowned sailors into her net. To sleep on the sea was to rest within those gods' domain, to trust their mercy for another dawn. That faith gave their sleep, when it came, a kind of surrender that few modern people know. On calmer nights, when the moon cast silver light over the water, the sea could become a place of rare peace. The sky stretched endlessly, the stars reflected in the black surface below. The ship, drifting quietly, seemed to hang between two worlds, one above, one below. Men lay still, their breath sinking with the tide. In that floating stillness, sleep felt sacred, as if the ocean itself held them. Viking sagas often mention dreams that came to men at sea. Warriors dreamed of home, of their families and farms, of gods and omens. Some believed that the sea carried messages, that waves and wind could whisper truths through sleep. The ocean's rhythm, constant and ancient, lulled their minds into the same state that had shaped the dreams of their ancestors. In those fragile moments between waking and rest, the line between sea and sky, life and death, seemed to fade away. There was also a communal comfort in sleeping together on the deck of a ship, bodies pressed close for warmth, shoulders touching, breath mingling. The same trust that bound them in battle bound them in rest. Every man knew that another stood watch. That knowledge, the certainty that someone was awake to guard against danger, allowed the others to close their eyes, even if only for a moment. It was the same rhythm as the longhouse, translated to the open sea. When the journey ended and the ship returned to harbor, those brief sleeps on deck became part of the shared memory of survival. The men who had dozed through storms and moonlit stillness carried those nights within them, reminders of the bond between crew, sea, and fate. To rest on a Viking ship was to accept one's place in the great rhythm of the ocean, a rhythm that could cradle or consume, but never truly stop. In that acceptance, there was peace. For the Vikings, sleep was never about perfection or comfort. It was about trust in the world, in the gods, in the people beside them. Even on a restless sea, they found stillness within. In the next chapter, we'll explore the link between sleep and death in the Viking imagination, how rest, burial, and the promise of Valhalla intertwined to form their most powerful vision of peace. To the Vikings, sleep and death were not distant cousins, they were reflections of each other. Both were acts of surrender, both journeys into darkness, and both carried the promise of awakening. In their language, the word for sleep often appeared alongside the word for death in sagas and poetry. Warriors were said to sleep in Odin's hall after dying, and the slain on battlefields were described as having fallen into the long sleep. Connection between the nightly rest of the living and the eternal rest of the dead shaped how Vikings viewed peace, destiny, and the cycle of existence itself. In a world where life was uncertain and death could arrive with the next tide or storm, the Vikings learned to see rest as something sacred rather than fragile. When they lay down at night, they were reenacting a small version of the final journey, the descent into stillness, the fading of firelight, the drift into dreams. The return of morning was a resurrection, a daily rebirth. It was this patterned sleep, darkness, awakening that taught them not to fear what came after death. They believed the soul, like the body, simply moved from one state to another, as naturally as night becomes dawn. The sagas speak often of death as sleep. When a great warrior fell, he did not vanish. He merely went to rest until Odin called him to Valhalla. There, he would awaken again in a golden hall, surrounded by comrades, drinking mead from shining horns and fighting glorious battles that ended not in pain, but in laughter. For others, death led to Folkvanger, the meadow of Freya, where peace and beauty replaced struggle. Even those who found their way to hell, the quiet underworld ruled by the goddess of the same name, were not said to suffer torment. They simply slept, surrounded by shadow and silence. To the Vikings, these afterlife realms were not abstract. They reflected the same patterns they saw each day, the cycle of labor and rest, of work and renewal. A man who had fought well-earned rest, just as surely as a farmer who had tilled the fields. Both were rewarded with peace. Death, like sleep, was something to be met with dignity, not fear. Funerary customs reflected this belief. When a Viking died, their body was often laid out as if they were simply sleeping. Eyes closed, hands folded, head supported by a cushion, surrounded by their favorite possessions. Weapons, tools, jewelry, even food and drink were placed beside them, as if to ensure their comfort in the long night ahead. Their ships, sometimes set aflame and sent out to sea, became symbolic beds carrying the sleeper to the next world. Fire and water, light and darkness, body and soul, all intertwined in the final act of rest. These rituals were not just about honoring the dead. They were about reminding the living of the sacred rhythm of life. To watch a ship burn on the horizon, its flames flickering against the dark sea, was to witness both an ending and a promise. Just as the sun sank each evening only to rise again, so too would the spirit return in new form. Death, like sleep, was a turning of the world's wheel. In the quiet moments before battle, many Vikings embraced this philosophy. They rested not from weariness, but from acceptance. To sleep before risking death was a way of facing it calmly. Some sagas describe warriors closing their eyes on the eve of combat, murmuring to Odin or Freya, trusting that if they did not awaken in the morning, they would awaken elsewhere. This faith gave their rest a serenity modern minds rarely know, the ability to let go completely without fear. Even in their language and art, the link between sleep and death appeared often. Poets used phrases like the bed of earth or the sleep of stone to describe burial. The grave was not a prison, but a resting place. The mound or pyre was a bed where the body slept while the spirit continued its journey. Families visiting graves spoke softly, as if not to disturb the sleeper. Flowers, carved stones, and offerings were laid as tokens of care, much like covering a loved one with a blanket. For those left behind, the cycle of grief and healing followed the same rhythm. The first nights after loss were filled with sleeplessness, tears, and dreams. Then, slowly, the heart settled, accepting that the one who had gone to sleep was not lost, but transformed. The belief that rest was eternal comforted them, easing the edge of sorrow. They did not need to imagine an end only, a continuation beyond sight. There was also poetry in the way nature mirrored these ideas. Winter, with its long dark nights, felt like the world's own period of rest, a time when life seemed to die only to be reborn in spring. The Vikings saw the same truth in themselves. Every night, when they surrendered to sleep, they practiced this eternal rhythm, the death and rebirth of the soul, wrapped in the warm fur of faith. Imagine the final quiet of a Viking night. The fire fading, the stars cold and clear above, the breath of sleepers rising in unison. For them, there was no fear in darkness. It was a familiar friend, an echo of something greater. To sleep was to trust in the turning of the world. To die was to continue that trust, to rest forever in the arms of gods and ancestors. The Vikings did not dream of escaping death. They dreamed of meeting it with the same peace they found each night. In that, they discovered the deepest form of rest, the knowledge that every ending was only another beginning. In the next chapter, we'll explore how the Vikings saw sleep not just as rest, but as medicine, how folk remedies, herbs, and ancient healing rituals turned the night into a time of restoration and recovery. The Vikings understood something essential about the body. Even without medicine or science, they knew that healing came with rest. Sleep was not only a time for the mind to dream or the soul to wander, it was when the body repaired itself. After days filled with labor, cold, and danger, night became a quiet sanctuary for recovery. In their world where herbs, warmth, and faith replaced doctors and hospitals, sleep was the most reliable medicine they had. When a Viking fell ill or was wounded, the first instruction was almost always the same: to lie down, to rest, and to let the body do its work. Families tended to the sick within the longhouse, surrounding them with warmth, comfort, and soft voices. The air would be heavy with the scent of herbs, thyme, juniper, yarrow, and chamomile. These plants were burned, steeped in teas, or tucked into bedding to soothe pain and encourage calm. The gentle aroma of smoke and herbs blended with the crackle of the hearth, wrapping the patient in a cocoon of quiet recovery. Healing was a communal act. No one slept or suffered alone. If someone was feverish or weak, another would sit nearby through the night, keeping the fire alive and whispering words of reassurance. The Vikings believed that warmth and companionship were as important as any potion. The rhythm of shared breathing, the glow of firelight, and the comfort of presence became medicine for the spirit. They knew that the body healed best when the mind felt safe. Many of their folk remedies were tied to sleep. Poultices of moss and honey were applied to wounds before bedtime, believed to draw out infection and aid healing. Herbal teas of valerian or chamomile were used to calm restlessness and invite slumber. Some even tucked sprigs of herbs beneath their pillows, trusting their scent to guide dreams toward peace. Though their understanding was practical rather than scientific, modern medicine would agree. Rest and calm truly are the body's best tools for recovery. The Vikings also recognized the link between fatigue and strength. A weary warrior who pushed beyond his limits risked illness or failure. A farmer who ignored his exhaustion could lose an entire crop. Sleep was viewed not as laziness, but as wisdom, a way to restore what life and labor drained. In a harsh northern world, rest was survival. The person who slept deeply could rise strong. The one who neglected sleep invited weakness. Their healing rituals reflected their deep respect for balance. The body, the earth, and the gods were all parts of one system. A sickness might be caused by a cold spirit, a curse, or an imbalance between heat and cold. Sleep was a way to restore that balance. When the body rested, the soul could settle, and the natural harmony of life could return. This idea, though wrapped in myth, aligns with what we now know about stress and recovery. Sleep calms the nervous system, slows the pulse, and allows every cell to repair itself. The Vikings, without knowing the science, practiced this truth every night. In times of grief or trauma, sleep took on a different form, one of mercy. After a death or battle, families often experienced nights of uneasy quiet. They would burn calming herbs or light small lamps to invite gentle dreams. It was said that sleep softened sorrow, allowing a heart to mend in its own time. Rest was seen as a gift from the gods, a kindness given to those who endured hardship. Dreams, too, were part of healing. The Vikings believed that good dreams could cleanse the spirit. After illness, many people reported visions of clear water, green fields, or ancestors, smiling symbols of renewal. These dreams were celebrated as signs that the soul was mending alongside the body. The night, with all its stillness and mystery, became a kind of temple for recovery. The connection between sleep and healing was also woven into their myths. The god Balder, known for his purity and peace, was sometimes associated with rest and renewal. His death and eventual return in the stories symbolized the eternal cycle of loss and recovery, the same rhythm that governed the human body. In this way, mythology mirrored biology, reminding people that even after darkness, light would return. In the long winters, when sickness was most common, rest became almost sacred. Families spent more time indoors, sleeping longer hours, allowing their bodies to conserve strength. The combination of warmth, darkness, and togetherness created a natural medicine. Even today, scientists know that longer sleep in cold seasons helps the body maintain immunity. The Vikings didn't need charts to tell them this. They simply followed what nature taught. Imagine the quiet of a winter night in a Viking hall. A sick child lies under thick wool blankets. A mother hums softly, stirring a pot of herbs over the fire. The scent of pine fills the air. Outside, snow falls in slow silence. Inside, warmth spreads, the fire crackles, and eyelids grow heavy. Healing begins not with noise or haste, but with surrender to rest, to calm, to the steady rhythm of life continuing. For the Vikings, sleep was more than the absence of wakefulness. It was the presence of peace, a time when the body rebuilt and the soul returned to balance. In their world of storms and struggle, this nightly renewal was one of their greatest treasures. In the next chapter, we'll look more closely at the small rituals and customs that surrounded bedtime, the quiet practices, herbs, songs, and gestures that helped the Vikings drift gently into sleep each night. As the day in a Viking household drew to its slow golden close, the coming of night followed a gentle rhythm. Sleep didn't arrive suddenly. It was invited. The Vikings practiced quiet rituals and customs at the end of each day that helped turn the noise of work and life into silence and rest. These were small, humble acts: tending the fire, washing hands, and faces with cool water, sharing a final word or prayer, and letting the body and mind settle into stillness. In these moments, the transition from waking to sleep became something sacred, a nightly ceremony woven from simplicity and care. The first sign of bedtime was the soft dimming of light. As the fire burned lower, someone, often the woman of the household, would rake the embers into a glowing pile and cover them with ash to keep them alive through the night. This simple act was more than practical. It symbolized protection. The hearth was the heart of the home, and ensuring it would survive the night was a promise that warmth and safety would greet the dawn. The sound of the poker scraping the coals marked the end of the day, a signal for quiet to fall. Then came washing. Water was drawn from barrels or streams earlier in the day, and though it was cold, The Vikings valued this nightly cleansing. They believed that washing away the days' sweat and dirt prepared the body for rest and the soul for peace. It was common to wash one's face and hands, sometimes even feet, before lying down. The scent of clean skin mixed with the earthy aroma of smoke and wool, creating a comfort that felt both physical and spiritual. Before sleep, some families shared a few final words. It might be a brief conversation about the next day's work, or a story told softly in the flicker of firelight. The sagas say that stories were as common at night as meals during the day. Children drifted off to the sound of heroes and gods, of dragons, voyages, and love. The rhythm of those tales, slow, repetitive, and soothing, worked like a lullaby. Even adults found calm in the retelling of old stories, for they carried reminders that struggle and victory, loss and renewal, always returned in cycles. Herbs and scents also played a part in Viking nighttime rituals. Lavender and chamomile were not common in the far north, but they had their own local equivalents: meadowsweet, yarrow, and juniper. These were burned or placed near bedding to purify the air and ease breathing. Juniper smoke was thought to chase away illness and evil spirits, while thyme and valerian were used to bring calm. The smell of these plants mixed with the fire's smoke, filling the hall with a natural perfume of earth and warmth. Another quiet ritual was the evening prayer or offering. Some families spoke softly to their household spirits, small, unseen beings known as landvitur or ancestors thought to protect the home. A drop of ale or milk might be poured near the door as a sign of thanks. Others made the sign of Thor's hammer over the hearth before sleeping, invoking the god's protection against storms or harm. These small acts blended religion and daily life so naturally that faith became part of the rhythm of rest. As everyone settled into their places along the benches and straw beds, a calm hush descended. The sounds of the day faded, the bleating of goats outside, the echo of axes, the chatter of neighbors. Only the soft breathing of people and animals remained. Mothers might hum quietly to restless children, simple songs with long flowing tones meant to calm rather than entertain. Music, in its gentlest form, was part of the Viking night. It wasn't loud or elaborate, but steady like waves against the shore. Even the act of arranging bedding was deliberate. Woolen blankets were shaken to remove dust, furs fluffed for warmth, straw smoothed beneath. People tucked themselves close, ensuring that no one lay too far from the fire's fading heat. The Vikings had no concept of personal space as we do today. Closeness was both comfort and necessity. The feeling of another's presence, the steady rhythm of shared breath, created a sense of safety that guided the body easily into rest. Before sleep fully claimed them, some whispered brief hopes or blessings, words of gratitude for food, warmth, or survival through another day. Others might ask for dreams of guidance, or for ancestors to watch over the home. These quiet moments were deeply personal, shaped by family tradition or region, but they all carried the same heart, an acknowledgement that rest was sacred, a gift not to be taken for granted in a harsh world. Then came silence. The longhouse would dim into darkness, the air cool and smoky, the last crackles of the fire fading into soft red light. One by one, the sounds of movement ceased. The final murmur of voices would drift away, leaving only the quiet music of breath, the rustle of furs, and the slow, low hum of the earth itself. In this stillness, sleep arrived like an old friend, gentle, unhurried, inevitable. The Vikings didn't chase it or fight it. They welcomed it, as they welcomed the night and the turning of the seasons. Their rituals, small and grounded, guided them toward peace not just in body, but in spirit. In the next chapter, we'll see how that peace began to change as new beliefs arrived, when Christianity spread through the north, reshaping not only faith, but the very way people thought about rest, dreams, and the night itself. For centuries, the Vikings had lived in harmony with the rhythms of nature and the gods who governed it. Their nights were guided by firelight, their dreams by the old myths, and their sleep by the steady turning of the seasons. But as Christianity spread through the north, that ancient balance began to shift. The new faith brought new ideas about sin, salvation, and the soul ideas that transformed not only how people lived, but how they rested. The arrival of Christianity did not just change the Viking day, it changed their nights. The old Norse worldview treated sleep as natural, sacred, and connected to both the physical and spiritual worlds. Dreaming was a way to commune with gods or ancestors. Death was simply another kind of rest. Christianity, however, brought with it a very different vision. Sleep began to take on moral meaning linked to purity, temptation, and even the state of the soul. Night was no longer just a time of quiet renewal. It was also a time of testing, when darkness symbolized not peace but potential sin. Missionaries and early priests arriving in Scandinavia saw the Viking reverence for dreams and night spirits as dangerous superstition. They warned that not all dreams came from God. Some were tricks of demons sent to tempt or deceive. The peaceful acceptance of the unseen world that had comforted the Vikings for generations was suddenly questioned. Sleep, once viewed as a sacred bridge to the divine, became something to be guarded carefully. Where once they had prayed to Frigg or offered milk to household spirits, converts now crossed themselves and whispered the Lord's Prayer before bed. The language of rest also changed. In the old sagas, to sleep was often to find peace or unity with the gods. In Christian texts, however, sleep could represent sloth or spiritual weakness. To sleep too long was to risk idleness, a vice warned against by monks and priests. The ideal life became one of discipline and wakefulness. Early Scandinavian Christians were encouraged to rise before dawn for prayer, disrupting the natural rhythms that had once defined their ancestors' nights. This shift in thought reshaped the emotional landscape of rest. Where Viking nights had been communal and open, filled with shared warmth and whispered stories, Christian nights grew quieter, more introspective. Families still slept side by side, but the tone of evening changed. Bedtime prayers replaced pagan songs. Talk of dreams became cautious. People began to view the night not as a friendly realm of spirits, but as a shadowed domain where one's faith could be tested. The architecture of sleep changed as well. As Christianity spread, churches rose at the heart of settlements, and new homes were built closer to them. The longhouse, with its shared hearth and open layout, slowly gave way to smaller, divided spaces. Privacy began to replace the old communal sleep. This shift, subtle at first, marked a profound transformation in how people experienced rest. The spiritual togetherness that had once defined Viking sleep began to fragment into individual devotion. The warmth of shared bodies was replaced by the quiet separation of rooms. Still, the transition was gradual, and for many generations, the old and new ways coexisted. In remote villages, families continued to honor the land spirits, burn juniper for cleansing, and whisper ancient blessings before sleep, even as they prayed to Christ and his saints. The Norse heart was slow to surrender its rhythm. Old customs lived on beneath the surface of new beliefs, blending into a uniquely northern Christianity, half lit by candlelight, half by firelight. The priests spoke of eternal rest, not as a return to the earth, but as a reward in heaven. Yet for the people who still felt the pull of the old faith, this new heaven did not entirely replace Valhalla or the peaceful meadows of Freya. Instead, the two visions blended. The Christian paradise took on the familiar warmth and light of a Viking hall, filled with friends, food, and music. Even in conversion, the people of the North carried their longing for comfort and togetherness into their new faith. The symbolism of sleep also deepened under Christian influence. The phrase eternal sleep came to describe death in sermons and prayers, connecting the nightly act of lying down to the promise of resurrection. Sleep became a metaphor for faith, the trusting surrender of the body to darkness, with the assurance of awakening at dawn. In that sense, even as the old gods faded, the sacredness of sleep endured. It was simply reshaped, given new language and meaning. But not all the change brought peace. The new moral weight of night introduced anxiety. The simple acceptance of fatigue and dreams gave way to fear of sinful thoughts, nightmares, and spiritual weakness. Monks wrote of wrestling with temptation in the dark, and lay people feared that sleeplessness was a sign of guilt or possession. The once blessed silence of the longhouse began to carry whispers of worry. Rest became something to earn rather than something to trust. And yet, despite these transformations, the deep northern night remained what it had always been: vast, quiet, and full of mystery. Beneath the hymns and prayers, people still felt the same ancient comfort in darkness. The fire still flickered, the snow still fell, and families still huddled together under wool and fur, breathing in rhythm with the earth. The faiths had changed, but the human need for warmth, peace, and sleep remained eternal. In the next chapter, we'll look at what modern people can learn from all of this, how the Vikings' harmony with darkness, rhythm, and simplicity can teach us to rest better today, even in our world of noise, light, and restless minds. If the Vikings could somehow look upon our world today, glowing through the night with artificial light, humming with engines, buzzing with screens, they might wonder how we ever managed to rest at all. They would see people chasing sleep as if it were an enemy to be conquered, fighting their own bodies to find peace that once came naturally. Yet in the quiet simplicity of their world, the Vikings held the wisdom we've forgotten. Their nights remind us that good sleep is not a luxury or a trick of technology. It's the birthright of anyone who learns to live in rhythm with the earth. The first lesson the Vikings offer is that sleep follows balance. Their days were filled with movement, labor, and fresh air. Their nights were filled with calm, darkness, and routine. This steady cycle trained the body to rest easily. Modern life, by contrast, keeps us always halfway between effort and rest, never fully awake, never fully asleep. The Vikings didn't need alarms or stimulants. Their energy rose and fell with the sun. Reclaiming even a fraction of that natural rhythm, stepping into sunlight by day, dimming lights by night, can begin to restore what we've lost. Their world also teaches us the value of light and darkness. Firelight and candle glow prepared the Viking brain for sleep in ways that science now confirms. The warm red tones of flame told the body that night had arrived, while our modern blue and white lights do the opposite. To sleep like a Viking, one must invite the dark, turn off the screens, lower the lamps, and let the night be night again. There's peace in shadows, in the slow fading of light, in the acceptance that the world can be still for a while. The Vikings also understood the comfort of closeness. They slept side by side, wrapped in furs and surrounded by family, animals, and warmth. In our world of private rooms and silent nights, loneliness often keeps people awake. The heartbeat, the breathing, even the gentle stir of another nearby, these sounds once told the human brain it was safe to rest. We are social creatures, made for shared warmth. Whether it's sleeping near a partner, a pet, or simply surrounding yourself with familiar comfort, that sense of safety is part of true rest. They remind us, too, of the importance of physical fatigue. The Vikings didn't need exercise routines or sleep aids. Their work itself ensured that rest would come easily. The ache of muscles, the satisfaction of labor, the honesty of exhaustion, all of it paved the way for deep sleep. For modern people, who often spend the day sitting and the night staring at glowing screens, the body's natural rhythms have grown dull. Movement, even gentle and steady, helps rekindle that balance. A body that is used earns its rest gladly. Perhaps the most profound lesson the Vikings left us is their peace with imperfection. Their nights were not silent. They were filled with the crackle of fire, the snort of animals, the creak of wood. Their bedding was not soft by our standards, their rooms not pristine. Yet they slept. They accepted the world as it was, not as something to be controlled. Modern minds often treat rest as another task to optimize, another goal to perfect. But the Vikings remind us that sleep comes when we surrender, not when we strive. They also understood the power of ritual. Every night, small acts prepared the body and spirit for rest, tending the fire, washing hands, saying quiet prayers, or telling stories. These gestures weren't complicated, but they mattered. They told the mind, the day is done. Modern life rarely offers that signal. The transition from work to rest has blurred into one endless hum. Reclaiming even a simple ritual, lighting a candle, reading by dim light, or reflecting in silence can teach the mind to let go. Even their approach to dreams holds wisdom for us. The Vikings did not dismiss dreams as nonsense. They listened to them. They believed that dreams carried meaning, reflection, and guidance. Whether or not one believes in prophecy, there's truth in that attention. Dreams show us what our waking minds avoid: our worries, hopes, and needs. To pay attention to them is to reconnect with the deep conversation between body and soul. Above all, a Viking relationship with sleep teaches humility. They trusted the night. They didn't fight darkness or fear silence. They let the world turn, understanding that rest was part of that turning. To sleep, in their eyes, was to align oneself with nature's rhythm, the same rhythm that moves the tides, the winds, the seasons. When one surrendered to that flow, peace followed naturally. If you could lie in a Viking longhouse for one night, you would feel it: the warmth of furs, the smell of smoke, the distant wind outside. You would hear the slow breathing of others, the soft rustle of straw. You would sense the ancient balance between safety and wildness, warmth and cold, light and dark. And you would realize that the peace they found was not in their time, but in their attitude. They lived close to the world, and the world took care of their rest. The Vikings did not have sleep medicine, clocks, or noise machines. What they had was simplicity. They lived by sun and moon, worked until they were tired, gathered near warmth, and trusted that night would bring healing. In that trust lay the secret of their rest. In the next and final section, we'll all close our journey through Viking nights, reflecting on how the lessons of their world can still lull us to calm today, and how even in our restless age, the past can still teach us to dream. And so, our journey through the nights of the Vikings comes to a gentle end. We've wandered through smoky longhouses, rocked along wooden ships, and dreamed alongside warriors, farmers, and families. We've seen how firelight, communal warmth, the rhythm of work, and the embrace of darkness shaped their rest, and how sleep, for them, was never just a pause in life, but a sacred, restorative act woven into every day. If you've listened this far, consider subscribing to History for Sleep so you can drift through more worlds like this one, where past lives and quiet nights meet. And take a moment to comment below. When do you listen to our stories? And what parts of history would you like to explore next as you fall asleep? Your thoughts help shape the next gentle journey we share. The Vikings teach us something timeless: that sleep is a gift, and peace often comes when we stop trying to force it. They rested deeply because they lived in rhythm with nature, accepted the night, trusted in each other, and honored their bodies and spirits. Even in our world of endless light and constant noise, we can reclaim some of that wisdom, letting darkness fall, slowing our minds, and surrendering to rest with the same quiet confidence they carried. So tonight, as you prepare for sleep, take a deep breath. Let the world slow around you. Imagine the fire fading in a longhouse, the soft rustle of furs, the steady rhythm of breathing beside you. Remember that sleep is not a battle, but a return, a chance to restore, to dream, and to align with the rhythm of life itself. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the Viking night. Drift gently into your own rest, and know that, for a few hours, the wisdom of the past is there beside you. Good night.